Hi everyone. So my research proposal is titled "A Coupled Human and Natural Systems Framework for Analysis of Current Manatee Research and Conservation Efforts in Florida." So I'll just be talking about how a social science component of my research is very imperative and important to be able to explain complex adaptive systems and help further management plans and actions to help sustain and protect the species. Okay, so to jump right into it, human-wildlife conflicts have increased tremendously over the past couple of decades. As human development has increased around coastal communities, there have been arising problems between humans and wildlife, which has affected, ecological systems on a local and global scale. And so specifically in the Florida manatee, it's a subspecies of the West Indian manatee, and it has actually become prioritized for scientific research due to its conservation status. It became downlisted in 2017 from endangered to threatened. And so this decision has really impacted the management and conservation initiatives that have been put to help this species. And so there have actually been new and emerging threats to the current population relating to like the environment and anthropogenic effects. And so there's a big science need for application of social science methods because there's been a lot of ecological research trying to understand their habitat and behavioral patterns and how the environment has affected these factors and things of their life, but there hasn't been many studies researching the human aspect and the human impacts in depth to the point of surveys and interviews. And so there's a need for a social science side and an interdisciplinary approach of understanding these ecological concerns to really help expand the um, management actions taken that can really help progress and grow and sustain their population. So there have been a lot of knowledge gaps in how and why these ecological shifts have affected human systems specifically, and what that means for the future of human and other species populations and sustainability efforts. Specifically, these emerging knowledge gaps in manatee research and conservation. Due to Florida manatees being a keystone species, they help identify major changes in their environment that can drastically influence the ecosystem health and human health. And so there's been a lot of debate about financial needs and scientific communication efforts when it comes to the ecological issues of the Florida manatee. And there's been minimal work acknowledging and incorporating the socioeconomic aspects. So this proposal wants to address how these subspecies population and their habitat needs have affected and can continuously affect the population of the human subsystem, and conversely, how public attitudes and behaviors influence the manatee population and habitat. So, this proposal wants to place the Florida manatee issues into a coupled human and natural systems framework, or aka CHANS framework, and provide a structured way of evaluating the connectivity, synergies, and relationships between complex natural and human adaptive systems. And so implementing the social ecological systems framework, or SES framework, within CHANS can help organize these findings and have a common grounds for multiple disciplines to understand each other and communicate these findings and um, decision analysis practices to a general audience for better knowledge and understanding of human manatee and human wildlife conflicts and interactions in general. So some important terms that I've already been using already are multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary. So essentially, this proposal wants to move from multidisciplinary to an interdisciplinary approach. So as these diagrams show, like multidisciplinary, as you can see, is separate, almost silos. Interacting with each other. So essentially, when many different entities are doing their own specific little part, and so there's a little collaboration coming together. It's more additive. So it's like, okay, I'm going to do everything in my specific niche and then tell you some things about it. And then you do everything in your niche and tell me a couple things about it. So we want to move from that to interdisciplinary, where these silos and specific niches are actually being combined within the decision analysis process and collaborative process of and really creating a new way of thinking by bringing multiple disciplines together to expound on ideas for relevant and useful solutions that can benefit all or most parties involved and really be more integrative between the natural and the social sciences and be more synergistic instead of additive. And so also CHANS, a coupled human natural systems framework, as I mentioned, it's just a framework used where human and natural components interact. So again, focusing more on interdisciplinary approaches and social ecological systems, again, how I mentioned, are essentially a complex adaptive system describing the close relationship between people and nature, and human society is embedded in how human society is embedded in nature. So really looking at, the ecological climate drivers and changes and how this affects wildlife pathways and human pathways and how these human wildlife interactions affect outcomes and, current and future concerns. So this project really plans to incorporate, again, a holistic interdisciplinary thinking approach involving quantitative methods to establish complex cause and effect relationships and capture the attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions of manatee conservation from the public and professionals. And so the main questions I have are, what are the knowledge gaps and misconceptions, of any, of the public's understanding of manatee concerns and conservation efforts versus what the professionals are actually putting out and saying, and if there's any scientific jargon really stopping up the flow of communication of what's really happening in their environment, and how are these current ecological and anthropogenic factors that affect the social ecological system impacting the manatee population and human population across the Florida landscape, and using a case study with Crystal River on the west coast of Florida. And so my hypothesis is that using social science methods like SES and CHANS will help identify key ecological and environmental factors influencing population dynamics, behavioral patterns, and habitat changes of the Florida manatee population to help close existing knowledge gaps and further management actions and sustainability efforts for the current and future populations residing in Florida. So the main constructs, or the key constructs in this proposal, are, as I mentioned, coupled human natural systems and socio-ecological systems. And so these are just diagrams that explain how the frameworks are, and how variables can be put into the frameworks to really be in an organized manner. And so on the left, the coupled human natural systems framework, it's just the diagram is just explaining an organized way of how you can put in your variables that you're measuring. And then on the right, the social ecological systems kind of framework and diagram of four main components and variables: a resource units, resource system, governance system, and users, that can really help understand the interactions between one another, and to help understand further the outcomes that these produce because of the relationships going on between one another in the complex systems and relationships happening. So I will delve into it a little bit later in like the next 2 or 3 slides, but essentially I will be using a quantitative method of surveys, and like a survey, a questionnaire, to collect quantitative data on the public versus professional knowledge. And so a main thing is to really clearly define public versus professional. And so I'm essentially going to break the public down into two groups, and then so there'll be two groups of the public and then professionals that I will compare. And essentially the professionals being individuals who are trained in wildlife and conservation or science-related fields and work within the realm of manatee research, conservation issues, concerns, efforts in their current career and occupation. So these are sample questions from the survey instrument I will be using. I'm really trying to pick at the attitudes, beliefs, perceptions, ideas of the public and professionals and how they answer, and if they're going to be similar or different, to really see where, if any, again, are misconceptions or incorrect knowledge being spread within communities. And so seeing the results from the public versus professionals will really help. And these are some of the questions that I feel will really help extract that information. So, as this proposal is really honing in on the social science aspect of Florida manatee conservation, I will be using environmental identity theory and collective impact theory within this project to really extract the attitudes, perceptions, knowledge of the public specifically and professionals, but really seeing um, that disconnect, if any, between how the public thinks and views nature versus what is actually happening in reality and the research being produced. So the collective impact theory will really help collaborative efforts on the policy, socioeconomic side of bringing organizations and agencies together to really help hone in on specific management actions that can really further the manatee population and sustain it. And then the environmental identity theory can really extract the true and accurate perceptions people have towards nature, towards themselves in nature, and their connectedness with nature to see how their perception of their environmental identity aligns with the questions being answered and how they answer them, to really have an understanding of the why they believe what they do, and if it aligns with what's being put out by professionals in research. So again, essentially for my research design, I'm using quantitative method of a survey instrument to really hone in on the attitudes and beliefs of the professional versus public. And so the design structure I thought would be best would be a comparative case study. Again, comparing the professionals versus the public, and seeing where those misconceptions or misconstrued ideas are, if any. And I also thought of cross-sectional design, since I'm taking a section of Florida. Obviously, the public cannot count as the general public. It's only a section, a fraction of Florida on the West Coast, in Crystal River specifically. So a section from a large population, obviously the rest of Florida, I thought would be appropriate to have as a research design. So the main points for the methods, again, are structured surveys. However, I will be administering surveys half in person and half electronically. So in person, I will actually go to the case study site, Crystal River, specifically Citrus County, where it's a historically known area where large aggregations of manatees come every winter to, aggregate and get warm. So a lot of people know about these manatees coming every winter. And then um, electronically through listservs at UF through department mailing lists, related and unrelated to wildlife ecology, to break down that public into the two groups. One, an enthusiastic public who actively seek out opportunities to learn more about manatee conservation and manatees in general, but are not considered professionals. And then the non-enthusiastic public who aren't, opposed to manatee conservation, but they don't actively seek it out. And so just seeing the differences between the responses versus the professionals. So after all the data is collected, I plan to analyze data in Qualtrics, because for the electronic surveys, I will place my survey in Qualtrics for people to take. And so essentially the survey will be broken down into certain themes and sections about demographics, manatee conservation education, um, where people work, and just also have different types of questions like open and closed-ended and Likert scale questions to really grasp and engage in many different contexts, people's attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions, really put it in a way that can be quantified. And also use RStudio for analysis as well, for statistical analysis, and be able to put it into graphs and have a visual representation of results. So there's opportunity for this study to have a lot of limitations and boundaries. Four big ones are sample size, definitions, time, and financial resources. Sample size, again, just being very clear on what I'm subsetting, between the the sample population in Crystal River, and not counting it or acting as if that's the general public or all of, Florida. It's not being counted as all of Florida. And then definitions, being clear about public versus professionals. I think I just need to make sure I'm very, very clear on in order to have an accurate and precise analysis. And then time, just being able to get the goal sample size in surveys and having enough surveys to have a really good statistical analysis versus the two subgroups of the public versus professionals. And then financial resources, being able to drive out to Crystal River. It's a day trip, so I'll be going out multiple times and just having my time and energy spent there, and financial resources, making sure I'm getting the most out of my time and money spent, and making sure I'm gaining accurate and non-biased results. So after data analysis and finishing the project, I plan to first schedule a committee meeting to be able to just go over everything and review this project, and be able to really start preparing for publishing. And after it's published, being able to put it in a presentation to present for state and government agencies to hopefully help further their management plans and actions. And just help spread the education of manatee conservation and research efforts. And so being able to present at conferences and symposiums to really continuously put that information out there, so the public can learn more and understand more, and closing those knowledge gaps and misconceptions between the public and professional, and building that relationship between public and professional understanding of manatee conservation and science and research. So I just thought I'd throw this in here. This is like a tentative timeline I had for the project. And yeah, and these are all my references, and thank you for listening. Bye.